Thank you for hosting me at your beautiful campus, ISB. Thanks for the invitation. Thank you to the panelists. I too am disappointed we don't have an actual fireside, but perhaps there's a stubble fire burning on a farm nearby that will light our way. Anyway, we have a lot to talk about. We had a fascinating sort of pre-chat in the green room or whatever it's called. And I'm going to start with a question. I have questions just as a journalist covering India and the Indian economy, and I'm going to start with one of those. You have in India's IT sector something that's absolutely extraordinary. It's world-class. It's an engine of your economy beyond the actual size of its employment, and it's a success story by any measure. But in my view, as a foreigner, coming in and obnoxiously asking questions and writing about India, it's not enough. It's not enough to create employment for your probably hundreds of millions of left behind people. Where does India get the other industries develop, and where do you get the more modest jobs in your society, right? Where do you get vocational education? So how do you serve? You're looking from the pinnacle of the Indian economy. How do you serve the other, or how do they serve themselves? More to the point, the other, in between hundreds of millions of other Indians. Do you want to take that to start?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to this forum. The topic for the forum, research, I believe is very, very important as India looks to become a developed economy. That's something I've been passionately advocating and passionately supporting also. And to answer John's question, we need to develop our economy holistically. I believe that India is one of the few countries which is in the 19th century, 20th century, and the 21st century. So we have 40% of our population dependent on agriculture today.
40.
That's primarily in the 19th century. Automation is starting to hit that industry, but it's still low in terms of productivity. It contributes, if I remember right, about 20% to the GDP or 17% to the GDP growth. 17% to the GDP grows. 17% grows at about 3%. So it actually drags down the economy. And in the 20th century, we have our manufacturing sector, which is fast transitioning to the 21st century. It's probably around 20% of our GDP, and maybe employs about 25% of the population. And India, surprisingly, is actually primarily today a services economy. So jobs are being created in the services side today. So services include construction, infrastructure buildings. There's huge investment in infrastructure that creates jobs in the construction industry. Services industry also is all the work that's done in the healthcare side, all the work that's done in supporting the various developments that are happening in education, in everywhere there is growth happening. So that's where the services jobs are being created, including the fast-growing logistics and the Swiggies of the world and things like that. So that's where the jobs are being created, but it's typically at the bottom that these jobs are being created. We need to, as we transition to a developed economy, as we need to increase our per capita income, we need to take these people to the next level, which will require us to educate people in a bigger way, in a more programmatic way, structured way. We need to look at vocational training, and the challenge is, as we transition, all these sectors are getting impacted by technology.
Yes.
Right. So India has a very very challenging task ahead of us, and we all need to, of course, work together to make it happen.
So I'd like to hear from you in a minute, but maybe you can reflect on this.
Sure.
As an outsider who's new to India, I'm struck by the incredible quality of your elite schools, in one of which we're sitting right now, and the education at the very top. And again, it's a bit like the IT sector. You're doing incredibly well at the top, but am I not wrong in saying that there's a bit of a gap in vocational education, in training for, I don't know, jobs in factories, for this sort of, the training for this sort of the more common man or woman, as the case may be?
So John, let me first go to what Kris was mentioning on the economy side. Clearly, India chose services as the lead to grow its economy within the states and at the national level. And there's no right or wrong model. China went the manufacturing way, but hand on heart, I can tell you, I am pleasantly surprised how the manufacturing sector is reviving in India. I would have never thought or dreamt of. And I think these are the policies by Prime Minister Modi, especially on the performance-linked incentive schemes, which have brought in. Suddenly that has acted as a catalyst. You see Apple coming in, you see large manufacturing ecosystem moving in. And it's just not the main product. The entire ancillary ecosystem is getting developed. So therefore the jobs are getting created. That's one end of the rainbow. The other end of the rainbow is there is job opportunity or employment being generated in the unorganized sector, which are low-paying jobs, and those don't get, into the data when we look at employability and
But isn't it true that these are low-quality jobs?
I know. I'm just saying that I'm giving you the two ends of the spectrum here.
Yeah.
Right. And what Kris mentioned is there is a large gap in between which needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Vocational training is one piece which I believe can really not only give employability, but also generate entrepreneurs who may not want to, go into getting a low-paying job. And therefore, the Government of India, the Ministry of Education came up with this model of setting up vocational training centers in schools. And it's now part of the curriculum of CBSE board, class 9-10 module 1, or whatever it's called, and class 11-12 is module 2, where you give vocational training. And with those training, a child, a boy or a girl is employable or can pick up a small business after class 12. But there's a problem, and I'll just come to that. The success of this model has been that government has put money, capital expenditure on the vocational training centers, but invited private sector companies to run. And therefore it is succeeding.
Yep.
The problem on the other side is that suddenly in the last 15-20 years, the landscape of the people below the poverty line who come from socio-diverse backgrounds, they have now started thinking that their kids to get educated, well educated, get jobs, and they should not lead the lives which they have led all their lives. So therefore now you see kids are not dropping in between in class 6, 7, they complete class 12, they are going into higher education colleges and universities. So it's a mix of now you get a vocational training skill set, you get a graduation, so the quality of the child is better than what it used to be earlier. So that's the first fundamental difference which is
better
happening in the
before.
landscape.
Yeah, I will challenge you a bit because we've looked at the issue of unemployment in India, which is kind of persistently high and edging upwards, right? Which should not be happening in a booming economy. And when I've researched this, one of the things I've heard from employers is that the graduates just don't have the skills, right? Is that something that you think India is addressing or
Yes,
can
I
address?
think that is a dichotomy we have. If we look at graduates, about 29%, let's say about circa 30% are employable when the industry goes to interview on campus.
How much? What percent?
30. Yeah. And majority of them are also, we need to retrain them. And in the IT sector is more or less the same. So I believe that the time which we have lost for the last 2 decades, this needs to be addressed very urgently. And that can only come through the industry-academia partnerships.
Okay.
Because today, majority of the higher education in India are preparing the youth for jobs in future, which means business as usual. But by the time an engineer, a medical student completes 4 or 5 years, the world has moved, the earth has moved under your feet. There are new technologies which have come. So we need to now go into creating future of job for the youth, which means that industry must sit with the academia, review and revise the curriculum ASAP without losing any time. And that needs to be constant engagement. It's not a one-time engagement because the needs of the industry are changing fast. Academia needs to really understand and then prepare the youth for that. That's point one. The second quick one which I want to just make here is on the engagement on research. We have very, very good talent in the academic institutions, and money is not, is available. It's not that it is low in supply. The problem is that if the academic institution can demonstrate cutting-edge research, money from the same industry and many other industries would be available again and yet again. The only thing is it has to be done in a transparent manner. The research projects need to be shared on constant quarterly basis. Industry must send their senior people into the academic institutions when the research projects are going on. And I think these are the two major factors which can really start shifting the landscape on education, on employability of each student which comes out, and therefore the quality of education.
So business needs to get more engaged,
Yes,
in other words.
absolutely.
Okay, Kris, I think you wanted to say something.
So on employability, when I look at what the IT industry has done, see, in IT industry, what happens is the technology is moving very fast, and there is no way an academic institution is going to keep pace with the changes in technology, because there you have to educate the teacher to learn the technology first, and then you educate the student to use the technology. Curriculum needs to change, exams have to be changed, etc. So that's a long drawn process.
Yeah.
So what industry has done is to create a training process within the industry itself. The industry takes a continuing education as its responsibility and keeps retraining people on an ongoing basis. So for example, 5 million people are employed, the industry is transitioning to AI.
Yes.
And all the major companies are training people on AI tools right now, because they can't be sent back to academic institutions to get retrained. And unlike the developed economy where you fire the person and rehire a new set of people, or hire a new set of people, India has taken the route of retraining the people and retaining them.
It's more
inside.
responsible, isn't it?
Well, it's a better option as far as the industry is concerned, because the retraining costs are very low.
Yeah.
Right? Because India is a lower cost economy. I can understand why retraining becomes very expensive in a developed economy, because the cost of labor is very high. Here, the cost of labor is very low, so we can retrain the people and retrain
But this
them.
is your existing workforce, which again, in my view, is a very elite, lucky, successful, on the whole group of people. I'm still intrigued by the recent school graduates who you guys or your companies, or say the private sector's companies, are finding wanting. There's a gap there, and you answered some of this already. That what the government's doing. Do you think the private sector is doing enough to hone the skills base?
Yeah, private sector is getting engaged on the vocational training. Private sector is also retraining employees within the business itself. But there's a cultural shift that's required. And Rakesh mentioned this. See, today, when somebody passes 12th or goes from the school to, let's say, college, their mind is that they need to actually become a white-collar worker, an office job.
That's what everybody wants?
Because they've been educated now.
Yeah.
They are no longer willing to work in a field or a farm or a estate. And I will give you a live example. We support tribal farmers in Araku Valley in Andhra Pradesh, coffee plantation. Okay, the land is owned by these tribals because they are the only people who can own this land parcels. And they are becoming richer and richer because all the coffee is exported. Their children are now going to school. Till now, they were not going to school. And 10 years from now, what worries us is that the parents are landlords, the children are school educated, and we'll have to import labor to work on the farms.
Oh.
The current generation works because that's what they're used to. So this is a transition now that's happening. And I see this in Punjab also. We went to a village in Taran, met 18 to 22-year-old high school graduates. They all want to migrate to Canada.
That's issue in Punjab, and we have written about that.
They don't want to. Their parents are farmers.
Yeah.
They don't want to work in the farm.
No.
Right, because
some of
they are
them have told
educated.
us this, yeah.
So there is a cultural change that is required.
I'm intrigued by the notion of India importing farm workers. But I have another question related to what we've both been talking about. Do people look down on blue-collar jobs in India? It seems like we spent part of this year speaking to Indians of very, very modest means all over the country, and they all aspired to office jobs for some reason, even if they weren't very good office jobs. Do people look down on good factory work?
No.
They don't?
I don't think so.
Okay.
In fact, if you see more and more labor which is getting into the manufacturing sector, it's not just that the person who's working feels, matter of pride. Even the management feels that they're contributing. The matter of fact is that, as I mentioned, the manufacturing sector is sort of getting back into the flavor.
Yes.
With all this. And also, the point is, it's just not office job. And there's a huge potential on tourism, right? We just need to have youth trained and become good tourist guides. Huge potential India has. So therefore, it's not that there is dearth of opportunities. It is, I think, the ecosystem which needs to be shaken up. I mean, let me use that word.
And whose responsibility is that?
It's also it's not manufacturing or services, it's formal and informal.
Right.
Yeah.
So formal is only 10%, 90% of people work in the informal sector.
Right.
They make do, they make a living, but informal sector, there's no job security, wages are lower, and it's transient job.
I meant
So
to
that's
ask
a
you,
challenge.
I meant to ask you kind of a related question as well, because you're a startups maven, and I'm wondering to what extent startup businesses could be one of the answers about what India does with its enormous demographic bulge. And again, I assume you work in a pretty rarefied world of really, really good startups.
No.
But a startup can also be, I don't know, a taxi service or...
It has impact on the job scene. One of the fastest growing job markets is Bangalore. And the reason for that is the startup ecosystem that exists in Bangalore creates large number of jobs in the logistics space, large number of taxis are created, large number of buses ply the roads. There are people who have to cook for these people. There are people who have to clean for this. There's a huge economy that's created around the startup ecosystem. The startup ecosystem employs probably, I don't have the exact number, but if you say 5 million in the IT services, it may be employing about 1 million or so.
In all of India?
In the startup sector.
Okay.
But the indirect effect of that throughout the economy is probably 10 times.
Maybe I've got my head screwed wrong, but I'm thinking startups also like just small business. I don't hear a lot of people talking about small business.
Right. So
in modest things, not in IT.
So the startup is defined as those that can be scaled up. It's technology dependent.
You're talking about IT and the really good stuff.
No, digital technology.
It's digital technology in the entire space. But I think the matter of fact, what Kris is talking about is, the startups ecosystem is such that everyone is in a hurry to become a unicorn. You understand? So they really don't get into the fiscal discipline on day one. And I think that is something which, and this is the world over, I'm not just talking about
I don't think
this
that's
is
just
something
India.
which needs to be really looked at. Responsible businesses will always look at responsible fiscal discipline also. Here the more you burn, the more losses you can raise more funding. So it's quite a skewed up system which sort of exists today. But having said that, I think on the startup ecosystem, India has demonstrated that we can, deliver hundreds of new startups every year, adding into the T. The challenge which I see is how many of them are going to really scale up, and that is something where the large businesses should also see this as part of their responsibility to handhold and support the startup ecosystem.
Yeah. Fair enough. I'm mindful of the topic of this conference. I wanted to ask a question about R&D, and I was actually, for my own work at the FT, pulling the numbers on R&D spending as percentage of GDP, which is usually an indicator of where an economy is going to go. And we were talking about this beforehand.
Right.
I think in Korea it's like 5% of GDP. What is it in India?
0.7.
0.7, right? So,
But in that 0.7, industry does 0.3.
okay.
So which is even a lower number.
What's wrong and whose fault is it?
I would say the problem lies on two sides, industry and academia.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in an academic institution.
Uh-oh.
I have to
Watch
be a
our
little
words.
watchful but brutal also.
Okay.
So what happens is, in the Indian ecosystem, when the industry gives money for research, the academic institutions say, thank you very much, and don't talk to us anymore. You've given us money, now leave it to us.
No.
Unfortunately, the system doesn't work like that. When the industry gives money on research funding, it needs visibility of every rupee being spent. And the research project for which the funding was taken feedback is given on regular basis, and once the project is done, then a complete, action needs to happen. And hand on heart, probably one or two may succeed, and majority of them may not even see the light of the day, because that's the problem of research and development. It's not that you will have 100% success rate. But the issue is that the academics feel that now we know what we have to do. We will do that. We'll put a paper, publish it, and that's the end of the story. So the industry loses interest. That's point number one. On the industry side, I don't think the industry is bold enough to put high amount of rupees or dollars, if I may say, in research, because that ecosystem has not developed and it's taken far too long. Having said that, if we today see the Western world, the developed world, billions of dollars poured into academic universities or academic institutions for research on health, on technology, on whatnot. I mean, everything. There is a partnership.
Isn't a lot of it government money in
So it is,
rich
and that
countries?
is where I feel that the time has come when we need to look at three stakeholders in this journey. The academic institution, which will receive the research funding, the industry, and the government should give matching fund, matching amount. So double the amount comes to the academic institution. All the three stakeholders are all important stakeholders. Senior industry leaders must participate into the research projects. The universities must be transparent in sharing the data, and then when we are looking at the projects getting into place, I mean, whether it's succeeded or not, the utilization, the use cases. I mean, for example, in my case, IIT Delhi developed Bharti School of Telecom Technology developed a 5G test bed because that was required. Airtel funded it. Government gave some grant to the institution, of course. And we actually sent our brains from Airtel to really work with them and my vendors, who are my suppliers, because they are equally responsible stakeholders. So I believe that if this ecosystem can be put in, then there can be large amount of money which will come into the research. We will get cutting edge research and we will get efficient research, which India can deliver. It is not that India can, look at space. I mean, we have demonstrated that at a very frugal cost, we can put the rocket to the moon. We can go up to Mars. So India is not that the talent is not there, or the willingness is not there. I think it's this ecosystem which needs to come together.
Another perspective on this is where is India on its development path?
Yes.
See, the focus has been to look at basic needs, to look at self-sufficiency in food, which we achieved through the green revolution in agriculture. India is today the number 1, number 2, number 3 producer of most food products. Of course, value addition doesn't happen here, but it has had its impact. So the focus really has been on basic needs. Focus has been on basic education. Look at how literacy has changed. Look at how poverty has been addressed. Today, out of the 1.4 billion people, I think it's estimated that about 50 million people are really poor. But we also need to accept that 650 million people have been moved to middle class during this period. So the focus really has been to bring technology as quickly as possible to India to address the basic needs, lift up the quality of life for people, etc. And the need for R&D and the funding for R&D, because if the need was there, the funding probably could have been there, and it was not felt. Now, from here to becoming a middle-income country or a high-income country, we need to now build our own IPs, because the wealth will be created on the IP that we create and owning that IP, right? So that's the transition, and now I think the need for R&D is being felt more, and forums like these are now discussing that, and I'm actually optimistic that, once we decide to do something, I can tell you that we will do it.
So what about this idea of matching funds, which I think they do in South Korea and Israel and the other countries that are doing this well? Can't you get this on the government's agenda, and why isn't it there
Government
already?
does, but majority of the funding goes to the public universities.
To public universities.
They do. I think barring 1 or 2 private universities who would have got the fund, and now under the NRF. Am I right? The National Research Foundation? Or
That's
where they are now saying the private institutions can also access that money.
NRF.
So that already sort of put it in the guideline.
See, again, the government funding primarily is focused on basic research, long-term research.
Yeah.
Because industry will fund short-term research.
Okay.
Applied research. So that they can see a benefit coming 3 to 5 year time frame. Okay. So the funds that are directed towards research goes to different set of activities, etc. We need both. We need basic research, which will get primarily funded by government and philanthropy, some industry, and we need applied research, which will primarily get funded by industry.
I have a little different view on this, because I think if we see the healthcare, it's long-term research. Private industry is funding that. It's not a short-term. You have to get into developing molecules and whatnot. So that's a long-term research. Similarly, I believe on increasing productivity in the agri and agro industry. That is a long-term research which the agri universities need to do. And I think that is something where I feel that the agriculture universities, who did a lot during the 80s when we became self-sufficient, really big development on agriculture research is happening in very small measures. And I think that needs to be taken to the next level, where again the industry or the agro-food industry and government can really play a big role.
One last question about research for me. I wanted to also open it up so that people had questions that could join the discussion as well. Maybe this is a can of worms, but what about foreign money for research coming into India, or does that come up against your, foreign funding issues in India?
Any foreign funding will have to go through.
I don't mind asking the question. It does have to go through some bureaucracy. FCRA. Answers my question. Okay. Then maybe one more question about philanthropy. I know you guys wanted to talk about that, and you both had views. Is the private sector pulling its weight in terms of, this is a developing country. The top of the private sector, which you both represent, is doing tremendously well. Is it doing enough?
So, John, I think first of all, we are in a very different phase. You keep saying India is a developing country. In many areas, we are a developed nation. and in some areas we are still developing. So I really don't have the one word for what you are trying to say, we are a developing country. Having said that, philanthropy is something which is not new to India, or Indians for that matter. You go back thousands of years, there used to be a saying that whatever you earn, the sahi, or 10% of that, put it on the side for a noble cause, for a social cause. Those were the days when the money was generally spent in the religious activities or educational institutions. And you had the Nalandas and the universities and large religious organization or institutions which came up. Having said that, after independence, there was very little wealth creation for anyone, whether it was the industry or individuals, because the country was going through a very difficult phase. But post 1991, after the liberalization, we opened up the economy. We started seeing wealth creation opportunities. New age industries came up. IT,
Telecom.
Bharti is a product of post liberalization, and many others. And therefore, when we started to grow on the economic front, our employees, they were getting paid. You see, IT sector, Infosys, hundreds and thousands of millionaires got created, and ultimately that gave flip to two or three things. One is you not only were meeting your basic needs, but you had extra money to spend on beyond what your basic needs were. And today, if you see, I can tell you hand on heart, every Indian citizen does give money in one way or the other. And so therefore, philanthropy is not something which is new to India. Having said that, the CSR, which got legislated in India, recently as mandated, which started as optional, we spent about 24,000 crores. The industry who fall to that eligibility criteria is about $3 billion plus, which is a number which we can map because that gets reported in the annual reports. All those monies are going into specific social projects. Almost half of that, 45-50%, is in the education sector, health, and then there are many other areas where those funds become available. So what I'm trying to say is that post 91, we had the opportunity to create wealth for ourselves, and therefore we are now able to support the families who need it the most. But again, I'm saying every family does support their drivers, kids, their domestic staff, children's education, marriages, or whatnot.
That I'm aware of.
So therefore, to quantify is a difficult thing because that does not get counted.
I wasn't doubting the tradition at all, or the principle of generosity. It was more kind of a targeted question, right? Because we're talking about issues of competitiveness and helping the next generation, right? Rather than helping the household staff, like with respect, which is also wonderful. That's part of what Indians do. That's part of the culture. Do you think there's enough money going into all the worthy things we're talking about?
First of all, John, I think the biggest spender is the government itself. I mean, look at the government of India and the state governments, how they are supporting people or families in distress. So the industry cannot match that. I also believe, it is, you just can't have islands of happiness and islands of wealth when there is turmoil around you. So it is the responsibility of every citizen. We can't keep on telling the government to do everything. And we can't just say, after government, it is only the industry. I think every citizen of any country is responsible. We need to see that how can we really lend a helping hand and start creating a system which is more happy, more conducive, more at peace and calm around us. And for that, philanthropy, CSR, this is something which is a given, was being done, is being done, and I think is being done at a large scale.
Let me just give you one wonderful example of philanthropy doing something towards leapfrog, where India can be proud of what it has done. This whole India stack that everybody talks about, the payment infrastructure that we have created, etc. It's actually created as a digital public good funded by philanthropy and government. Right? And on top of that, private innovation happens. So that's a wonderful example of philanthropy in a targeted
Yes.
manner, creating something that has completely transformed, access to money, access to banking, financial inclusion. About 10 to 15% of Indians own credit cards, but 80% of Indians can do digital transactions.
Yes.
You go anywhere, you will see a QR code. Any merchant you see on the roadside has a QR code. They're all now participating in this.
Yes.
That entire movement was actually primarily funded by philanthropy and volunteers.
Yes, in the IT sector, I gather Bangalore helps make it. I think Bangalore brought it into life.
Just one example. I think you will see more examples of such new models emerging. This whole concept of digital public good is a new concept that is emerging. Another example is a modular open source identity program. So the UID, which is the fundamental layer of the payment and the India stack and the payment infrastructure that has been created, is now being exported to 11 countries. 80 million Philippine people are being given ID.
Yes.
Using the modular open source identity program. This entire thing is housed in IIIT Bangalore, in an academic institution, and being exported to the rest of the world.
So that's a good
funded by philanthropy.
A good example where Indian philanthropy changed not only India but
India
also
and overseas
the world.
Philanthropy also, foreign philanthropy also.
Terrific. I did promise to take some questions, and I see a man with a microphone. So if you have questions there where you can really make a point. I see a person in purple right there. Not purple, green right there. Yeah.